to it. The ordinance requires it, they certainly would. But with respect to the remainder, we'll provide a copy of the drawings that they can load up onto the system. We can address all of the other items in there, mostly code related. And again, my client comes into town looking to comply with the laws and the ordinances of this community and be a good citizen, and we'll certainly adhere to those requests.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can feel free to call up your first witness
Thank
now
you.
and introduce us and have them sworn in.
Yes. Robert Verengia, Verrengia. From Nick Tapataris and Associates, located at 10 Wilsey Square in Ridgewood, New Jersey. I'm licensed in the state of New Jersey as a registered architect. I attended NJIT and I have a Bachelor of Architecture. I also have a Master's in Civil Engineering.
And you're testifying as a licensed architect?
Yes.
So I would like to introduce him as an expert in that field, be able to go through the plans.
Thank you, we'll hear you as such.
I'm going to begin on sheet T001, which is in your packet. On the bottom left-hand corner has the existing site survey.
So we do mark the exhibits, so why don't we mark that, despite the fact that we have them, just for the record. So we'll mark that first sheet A-1. And if you have the second sheet there as well, you can mark that A-2. And if you can just describe, and is there a third?
There will be a third sheet.
We'll mark that A-3.
The third one will be the signage and the exterior facade, which will be in this.
So the property consists of a single-story building. It's a two-tenant building, and the use is proposed to go in the right-hand side, which is on the eastern side of the building. There is no on-site parking. The building is built on the lot line to the west, and on the east side, there is a side yard of .09 floor plan. The first floor will consist of a reception entrance at the front, which is where they will receive their clients. As you walk towards the back, there will be an area for lockers and coats for the clients to store their possessions. We're building 2 new bathrooms and 2 new showers. As you move forward toward the back of the building is where the fitness studio is, and that's where they will be conducting their classes. At the back is a rear exit to the back of the property and also an existing stairwell that brings you down to the basement. The basement will consist of storage and laundry for the facility. A201, which is marked A-3, is the exterior front facade. They're proposing one sign in the sign band that currently exists. It's a box sign that will be illuminated from the existing gooseneck lamps that are there. The sign is proposed to be 1 foot 11 inches tall, which complies with the 2 foot max in your ordinance, and it will also comply with area. The box sign is 28.2 square feet, where 40.9 is permitted. They're also proposing vinyl graphics on the windows, which will not exceed the ordinance of 25% coverage on each piece of glass. Back to T001, the zoning table. The proposed use is an instructional school and studio, which is a permitted use in the zone. The site width and front yard setback and side yard setback all comply with the bulk requirements of the zone. The rear yard, building coverage, floor area ratio, and lot coverage all are existing nonconformities. The building height and the number of stories comply with the zone. We're here for the parking, which is a variance, a new variance. 36 spaces are required and 0 are provided. And there is no on-site loading on the property.
Would you agree out of the 36, 17 are related to the top for the main floor and the 18 plus or minus? For the
Correct. 17.46, 18 spaces are required for the ground floor, and the remaining 18 are required for the basement. But again, it will not be open for public, it's just for employees for storage and laundry.
And with respect to the studio, you just showed for the board the studio itself. In the area in the lower half, those would be the trampolines that were going to be used.
Correct. So there is the trainer, which would be here, and then all of these trampolines are here, which is for the clients.
Right. Are you testifying to the sort of the use? I assume you're just, as an architect, you're not testifying to sort of how it's used in terms of participants and instructors and such. 'Cause I certainly have some questions about that with respect to the parking, but I want to ask the right witness.
We can have the principal get up, testify
Okay,
to those issues.
so I
He's
will hold that.
testifying to how the design flow has been in the.
Thank you. Yeah, you just started describing the trampolines, and I didn't know if you're the expert at it. But it's fine, and that's great if you would, but
Yeah, no, I'll
We'll leave
defer
that
to
to
the
that's fine.
the owner for that.
Thank you.
So.
So, I believe that's really, I think, covers most of what our testimony is from respect to the building itself. If the board has any questions or witness?
So the only variance that we're talking about is parking, and I don't know that we've necessarily had all the full amount of testimony to, but does anybody have any questions for the architect regarding anything we've heard tonight? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So then I will call Jason Yukonin, who is the principal of First Branch.
Great, please do. If I could ask actually you to just move these to the side, so if any members
Yeah,
of
no
our
problem.
public would like to see them,
Yeah.
if we just put them behind these two gentlemen.
If you mind, we can push it over there. He may want to point to that to some degree. in
Oh,
his
okay.
testimony.
Can I just ask a
Just rotate it
general,
a little bit.
general question about the parking requirements? Why, do we typically count the square footage of a basement as part of the parking requirements? I've never seen that
So I want
before.
more testimony to understand the use. We have, yeah, we've
Okay.
included basement, if like in a
Okay.
salon, if there was a lower level and it was gonna be
Used by the
used.
salon,
Yeah,
right, but not
What is that?
just
I don't know,
like
I guess
a
is that-
basement storage.
Part of your site plan approval, whether they're gonna ever use that for,
Oh, because
For
they
class,
could
they-
use it.
right, it's-
Okay,
it's
I
part of the
understand.
lease.
you know, when I lose anyone.
Then we have no
Yeah, okay,
ability
I
to
understand.
enforce parking.
If the board is concerned about that, we can make it a condition of the approval that the exercise programs would be allowed downstairs. It would just be used for the uses we presented here tonight. There's no intent to change that.
In which case would you reduce what you're considering your parking requirement?
No, because what
Because
we're
of-
doing
yeah,
is referring to what the zoning ordinance says.
Okay.
The zoning ordinance looks at gross square footage.
Correct.
And we can't change that. It is what it is. In terms of mitigating it, in terms of what the real impact will be, is that's why we're just describing for you the use of the two floors.
Thank you.
It's not 36, really, it's 17.
We'll have you sworn in as well. Yeah.
I do. It's, Jason. Last name is Yachanin. Yashanin. Yeah, that's okay. No one pronounces it right. Oh, and I'd like to make a correction. It's actually Seabright, not Seagirt, that we're in. I don't know where Seagirt is. South?
If you could you just describe for the board what perspirology is, what it does, and how you intend to operate at this facility?
Sure. Perspirology started 6 years ago. My wife and I moved out of Manhattan, found Seabright, and said, yes, we're going to open up there, which we started with a dance aerobics on the third floor of the building in which we're in currently. Maybe 2.5 years ago, we were able to take the second floor over of the building that we're currently in, and always been a dream to open a trampoline-based studio. Very good for low impact. Another option for our clients to do if they don't want to necessarily jump on the hardwood floor doing dance aerobics, come downstairs to the trampoline studio. So what we have here is something that I feel is kind kind of on the up and up in terms of fitness. Trampoline, it's like I said, it's low impact, it's good cardio, and it's generally pretty easy to do, so it's very accessible to a lot of people. You don't necessarily have to be a trained dancer. You don't have to really do anything except hold on and jump up and down and follow our instructor. So what we have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is 30 trampolines, one instructor per class who goes through, generally speaking, and I'll just use our Seabright location, about 30 minutes of dance cardio on the trampoline, aerobics, 30 minutes of full body toning on the trampoline. And we have some various classes, you know, some have maybe 45 minutes of bouncing, 15 minutes of toning, 15 minutes of bouncing, 45 minutes of toning, but it's all done on the trampoline.
Now, in addition to the instructor, what other employees would you have on this site at any given time?
Just the front desk person who would come in, help assist, buy any packages, hand out towels. That's actually me and Seabright. I basically take the money, pass out the towels, kind of answer any questions any of the clients have about the class, sign people in, answer the phone, email. So I would foresee one instructor and one front desk person.
In terms of deliveries, laundry, let's start with laundry. Are you going to have laundry delivered, or are you going to do it in the basement?
No, I'll use Seabright as an example. We do all the laundry at the studio. I sometimes take it home. I don't like doing that, but I do. But all laundry would be done on the premises, so no outside deliveries of towels or things like that.
How about other supplies?
I generally make a Costco run every 2-3 weeks. I will occasionally have something delivered, but I generally, or whoever is kind of the office manager, buy supplies, which really consists of hand wipes, cleaning materials, nothing too bulky or out of the ordinary.
And in terms of trash that you would generate from this business, can you just review that?
I would say it's more recycling than trash. Water bottles, seltzer bottles, energy drinks, things of that nature. Trash, is generally tissues, hand towel, paper towels. So it's more recyclables than trash.
Now, with respect to the scheduling of these classes, could you review for the board when you intend to have people come in and the schedule that you're anticipating right now?
Not being as familiar with Short Hills, I'm kind of mirroring this off of Seabright. Right now we have a 6 a.m., then we generally have an 8:15, a 9:30, and then either a 10:45 or an 11. Once the afternoon lull kind of hits, we do offer private sessions, which is just usually a one-on-one type of situation. We're closed pretty much through that kind of mid-afternoon, and then in Seabright at least we do have some evening classes, not many, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., but only Monday, I'm going to get this wrong, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I believe. We do not have them over the weekends. In terms of Short Hills, because I'm not as familiar, I don't know if we would necessarily start off with evening classes. I think we would see what, if any, there is a demand for it and kind of go from there. But I would say the morning 6 a.m. till 11:45 is the primary business hours.
Anything else in this business that you would like to let the board understand about what you're doing?
It's really fun. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't, not that I can, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I do have some questions.
Okay.
Will there be any retail sales? So you like water, seltzer, or energy drinks like you mentioned, is that just people bring in, or do you sell them?
In Seabright, we do have a little fridge with water, but it's only there really if someone forgets their water bottle. Most people do bring water bottles and things of that nature. We do sell some shirts, tank tops, crop tops, hoodies. That's about all we sell at the Seabright location. That's all I'm foreseeing here as well, apparel, and maybe we would have a fridge, but it's mostly as a backup in case anyone's getting a little passy-outy. But if they do forget one, yes, we will have them available.
Fair enough. And so I know you're saying you're not quite sure how it would work here, but initially you would imagine being closed on weekends? And just operating weekday mornings? I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Weekend mornings would be open, but I meant
Weekends,
the evening classes over the weekends we probably would not
Gotcha,
offer.
okay, thank you.
Unless there was people let us in,
Right.
but I don't know. I
Are children your clients ever?
In Seabright right now, we do have a couple classes geared more towards high school students. We didn't originally start with that. I don't know if we would necessarily start with that here unless, as we got going, some of our clients said, "Oh, I'd love to do this for, my daughter after high school." We would definitely consider it, but as of now, none of the classes are geared for children. But we're always open to
Okay.
adding that if there is such a need.
Great. Other questions about the use or? Okay. That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, public questioning, we didn't have it with the architect. You want to say that till the end?
We will, yeah, I can open that up again. Thank you. That said, since you're here now, I can certainly offer, yes, for
And if
any,
you have any for the architect as well, would be great.
that's fine, why don't we, those are your two.
I have one more, I'm a traffic expert as well.
Okay, so before we go to traffic, if there are any questions from the public for either this witness or the architect, I'll invite you forward now. Okay, thank you. Come on up then, please. Oh, no, you don't have to come up. In opposition. Okay, so what we'll do at the end of the application, before we take a vote, we open it up for comments from the public, and we would invite you then. Thank you. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
My last witness is Justin Taylor, who is going to testify to Mr. Klein.
I do. Justin Taylor, Taylor. I'm a principal in the firm of Dynamic Traffic. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey as well as Pennsylvania and Texas. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, testifying for approximately the last 15 years, and have testified at hundreds of boards throughout the state of New Jersey, although I haven't had the privilege to be here in Millburn before.
I'd like to offer Mr. Taylor as an expert in the field of traffic as well as engineering, in case any of those questions come up today as well. But he'll be mainly talking about traffic.
Great, thank you. We'll hear you as such.
Mr. Taylor, if you could you please describe for the, you're familiar with the property at 515 Millburn Avenue, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and have you done a review of that property and the parking that's available for that site?
Yes, I have reviewed the report that was prepared and submitted to the board by Mr. Klein. I've also had a chance to visit the site on my own, review the parking or lack thereof that's provided on site, as well as the parking conditions that are currently out there today. You've heard initial testimony that based on the total square footage of the building, we would generate a parking requirement of 36 spaces. You've also heard the testimony that we don't anticipate utilizing the basement for anything other than some storage and the laundry. So really what we're talking about is a dance studio size of about 1,700 feet, a little over that. So if you were to take that amount, what we're looking at is a parking demand of 18 parking spaces. Now again, because of the way the site's developed and the way most of those businesses along Millburn Avenue are, there is no on-site parking provided. They rely on the on-street parking along Millburn Avenue as well as the municipal lot, Lot 14, which is located just south of this vicinity. So in order for us to really figure out whether or not there was sufficient parking to handle what we were looking to do to come in here, a parking count was conducted in those areas during the peak times of this use. We counted between 6 a.m. in the morning and noon, and we counted the on-street parking on Millburn Avenue between Short Hills and Glenwood, or about a block to either side of where the proposed store would be, as well as the 2-hour parking spaces that are located in Lot 14. Now, Lot 14 also has permit spaces, but we really wanted to figure out what would be available for the patrons of this facility. They would come in, do an hour lesson and whatnot. So it's the pay meters that we looked at. And what we found with the study is that during the morning, we typically have about 35 spaces available. Now that dwindles as you get closer to noon, but the minimum we ever saw available in that stretch was 29 spaces. So there really is the available on-street parking to absorb the demand that this is going to use. The other thing that's nice is it's really a complementary use to the other uses that are out there. You have a couple restaurants, and the peak demand of this use is totally on the opposite end of the time frame that you're going to have for the Italian restaurant, for the Thai restaurant, when the peak evening rush would come in. So based on all that, I really feel that there isn't any detriment to the board granting the parking variance that's proposed for the project.
And with that, I would submit any questions that the board might have. You've had a copy of the report that you rely on as well as part of the package.
I have it.
Thank you. Joe, please.
I'm not sure that I understand the connection between you and the Klein firm.
So I work in tandem with Mr. Klein. We're a separate firm. He was not able to be here tonight. So I'm here on behalf, testifying on behalf of the report that he did and the data
But
that's
you
within
didn't
that.
actually participate in the study that he did.
I did not know.
Have you in the past reviewed and done other work similar to this?
I have. We trade hearings with the size of Mr. Klein's firm and our firm. We definitely ease each other on when there's a conflict. So I feel confident, one, in my ability to review what he's done, but also in the quality of the work that Mr. Klein does.
And with respect to your own observations, and can you please provide just a little additional summary of your observations of the area itself and what you've done in terms of looking at the site?
Sure, absolutely. I've had an occasion to visit the site on 2 occasions now. One being this evening to kind of take a look at what it was like at 6:30, right? Again, when those restaurants would peak. And we found there's about 25 spaces still available. More on the north side, less spaces adjacent to the restaurants. So I find that the numbers that are portrayed in Mr. Klein's study are pretty much in line with what I saw myself.
You went there once?
I've been there tonight, and I was there a week ago when this started, so twice. Twice.
And the other time was when?
Would have been last Thursday in the afternoon.
So you were not there actually in the morning?
No, I was not.
Yes. it's on there. Do you not have a copy?
No,
Pardon me. Sorry, we're just confirming that he has it. You can have my copy of it for your records. So. And this report, Eileen, can you just confirm that was here available for us tonight? Did that, I don't think that report, was that in the packet that came home? You had it in your, yeah, okay, just making sure.
Yeah, we did have review comments from both your engineer and your planner
Yes.
on that report as well, so.
And have you addressed those comments in this testimony? Or-
So the engineer concurred with the study and the findings of the study that the parking was sufficient to handle our demand. And I believe there were several comments in your planner's letter that have been addressed by the applicant, more to do with how the trash is going to be handled and how the deliveries are going to be handled for this facility.
Great.
If there's a feeling of this board that they'd like to have Mr. Klein testify, and we can carry it to the next hearing, but I do believe, given the reports from the board and Mr. Taylor's testimony, hopefully we satisfy any concerns you may have.
You may comment on it.
I think that, I had not seen this report, which is what I was conferring with the chair about. From a legal perspective, I'm troubled by this kind of testimony, because it really, with no offense to anyone here, degrades the professionalism of the process. A written report is effectively hearsay. It's a document that's handed to you. You have no ability to challenge or to question the author of this report. No offense to Mr. Taylor. He's reviewed it and is confident that he's got faith in Mr. Klein or whoever prepared the report. But the reality is he didn't prepare the report. And that just shouldn't happen. What should happen is the person who testifies is the person who's prepared the report, or at least has overseen the preparation of the report and is of the same organization. There have been times in hearings where, because of a language barrier of the engineer or communication problem, I've suggested that the board allow another engineer to effectively translate for the engineer who had been there, but the engineer who prepared the report was there. Here, again, with no offense intended to the applicant or to the traffic engineer who's testifying, Mr. Taylor, you know, I think this is just sloppy. And I don't mean that in a critical to the applicant. That's sloppy too. So I apologize for that. So I hate to carry it, but we do have a meeting in 2 weeks. My recommendation to the board would be to have either Mr. Taylor do the report and come back, or have Mr. Klein or whoever it is who prepared this report appear so that the board can ask any questions. And again, I don't mean that offensively to anyone, I understand.
It's a
This is
problem.
not a
Boards
big deal, but-
all over the state are having meetings every night, and
Understood.
it's trying to move this forward. My client has issues to try to move this forward as well. Mr. Taylor has, conferred with Mr. Klein here, and in fact, whether it be the Craig Shapiro report or you have the police report, it's not an issue that seems to have struck anybody. The reports seem to be moved, Mr. Klein's report by your professionals. All of that being said, if this board is uncomfortable with it, we'll come back and bring Mr. Klein in to testify to it.
I'll leave that to the board, but let me,
I can't.
I understand your
I can't vouch for his
concerns.
availability in 2 weeks, but I will do my best. If we have to carry it a period after that, that's fine, but
Okay, thank you. Joe, do you want to make a
I have
comment?
another major problem, and that is that the Klein study focuses, if I read it correctly, on the morning hours between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m., which is noon time. That's not the testimony that we heard from the proprietor, who said that he might very well have evening classes as well, if there was a demand for them. This study only talks about 6 a.m. to noon time, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Klein, but it looks like he was told this operation is going to be a morning operation only, so focus your study on the morning hours. That's not the testimony we heard. So I'm
Jim,
very,
can
I am troubled
I
by the
appreciate
fact
that
that
comment.
Mr. Klein is not here. He's the one who did the study, or his office did it. And this gentleman, again, without any offense intended, is not associated with the Klein office. He's looking at this report and saying, in effect, looks pretty good to me. That's really the testimony. That's not traffic testimony.
Okay, so we've heard, did you want?
So I would, just 2 points on that, and then one, I can testify that I was there this evening and last Thursday. So I have 2 data points that was collected on my behalf. I understand that I'm testifying to the numbers presented by Mr. Klein on the other data there. But I can tell you this evening, there were 25 spaces available that would be utilized by this. So while there is some utilization for the restaurants and the other uses along Millburn Avenue, there is an abundance of parking currently available this evening. So that's a portion of your concern. The rest, as you said, I have reviewed the work of Mr. Klein. I find that the times that he conducted are the same times that the applicant said is his busiest time. He's talked about the morning hours being the peak that he sees. There may be some afternoon private instruction, there may be some classes in the evening, but the prime time that he looks, based on his current business model, is weekdays from about 6 to noon, which is the focus of what Mr. Klein's study was. Now, I can't assuage your fear that I wasn't the one conducting these. What I can do is report that the methodology utilized by him is the same that I would do. I would have one of my employees out there conducting the traffic counts and the parking counts. We would quantify that data, and then we could compare it to the demand that might be generated by the facility. So in reviewing his report, I find the methodology is correct, and the conclusions that are drawn on that are the same that I would draw. So I understand the board's concern. I'm just,
Thank you. So I think, I appreciate that concern. I think we heard the testimony that, and I'll come to you just
Okay,
one second.
thanks.
I heard that they are considering evening hours, if there is the demand for it. I think, maybe we as the board have a sense of sort of the community's desire and use of, fitness facilities, of which we have a number in town. So I think it's fair to guess that maybe weekday evenings might be a popular time, and thus we don't have data to support that. So I think we may like to ask, call it the 5 to 7 or the 4 to 7, whatever he determines is the PM peak, to have some data. I appreciate the 2 data points. I think a little bit more, tabular format like you did would be appropriate. Before I continue, I wanted to let Diane make a statement.
So with due respect to Mr. Buzak and Mr. Steinberg, who have been doing this for a very long time, no matter what applicant is gonna come before us, there is only the parking that is available. So it's still gonna be this deficit of parking. So even coming back with more pinpoint data, and I just want to understand, like, it's not gonna change what's available. So what we're saying is, if there's not gonna be the parking, are we saying we don't want this type of use there? Is that where this is leading? That's what I'm just trying to figure out, because the parking, the number of spots they find is a number of spots, that's never gonna change. There's a large parking lot municipal across the way, which will have available spots. So I'm just the legal part of it, I understand what you're saying, but does that change what is available to us to determine this application on?
The problem is we don't know what's available. I've seen many, many parking studies. There is really, if I haven't really had an opportunity to study this, but I'm not, is it your understanding that there's a combination in here of available parking in the municipal lot and on the street?
Absolutely.
Both?
So the data that was collected was along Millburn Avenue between Short Hills and Glenwood, both on the north and the south side, as well as within the lot 14, the municipal lot. And all that's quantified. It was conducted every half an hour from 6 a.m. to noon.
Right, to your point,
Just-
Diane. Okay.
Right, I just
Thank
want you to notice that, Sean. I
Oh,
Thank you.
Can I also respond if I
Please.
might?
Yeah, let's stay on this point and then we'll
I,
come to.
I understand your comment, and it's all well taken. The challenge, though, is that the ordinance says what it says, and it requires parking. If the position of the municipality is that, similar to what you've expressed, essentially, if you have existing uses in the downtown area and they don't have parking, they don't have parking. And it's been pointed out on a number of occasions and in this application itself that, look, we can't create parking. There's no place to put it. So either you grant us the variance or we can't locate here. That's a challenge for the township committee, respectfully, to look at and say, one can say they're right. So maybe we ought to look at the ordinance and change the ordinance to say effectively, you don't need parking if you have a pre-existing building and there's no room for additional parking. And therefore, the on-street parking and the off-street parking in lots is sufficient, and then we wouldn't have the variance. But so long as the ordinance requires what it requires, an applicant has to meet the standards and the proofs. So we go through this exercise, and the practical effect is, I recognize, as you say, but we're forced to go through this exercise because that's the way we have structured in Millburn how we're going to proceed. If we want to change that to streamline it or to address the practical concerns that you're referring to, that can be done. But until it's done, unfortunately, we go through this process.
And it's frustrating because businesses may want to come in, do want to come in, and we do want businesses to come into town. So I guess we'll have to talk about that another time, what the TC can do.
I think when you put your other hat on,
Yeah,
you
when I'm
can
sitting
talk
in the
about
chair
that.
over there. Or no, we rotate chairs now. I don't know what chair I'll be in next.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Thank you. You had a question
I
or
just want
comment?
to point out that traffic study notes the purpose as determining the availability of at least 18 spots based on what you said before about just the top floor used as the practical studio space. But this see 30 trampolines and we have at least 2 employees, so, I mean, at peak, you're gonna generate at least about 32 spots unless people are sharing cars. So if the study could focus, there are going to be any edits made for data collection in the evening, or at other times, it would be nice to focus on potentially 32 spots.
So I can just, if I point you to what was already conducted, what was found was, there was, during that morning, between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., there was 34 spaces available,
I see that.
right? And I think it's already been committed to that the applicant would be willing to purchase permit spaces for the employees. So that takes the employee demand out of utilization of those on-street spaces. But the point's
I'm
taken.
just pointing to the purpose of the study, that's all. I mean,
Correct.
I understand the data shows that you have the availability based on what research was conducted.
Yep. Point taken.
Just the hours that the parking account was taken were under the proviso that the operation was going to be between 6 and 12, though we heard from the principal that he is considering or would consider expanding those hours. So I think we do have to have some evening parking counts to assess, even though, as Diane points out, the number of spaces is a fixed number. And that's more for future uses, where we may consider not this specific use, but other uses down the road, and whether we're going to be putting an undue burden on the traffic flow in that area.
Okay. Any additional, and anybody else? Okay. So what I believe is the temperature of the board is looking for two things and to essentially carry to a future meeting. One being, if someone just wants to stand up and move, you're welcome. I don't know, you've knocked off the sensor. It's unusual with so many people.
Just walk up
Pull the trampoline in.
around the aisle. Somebody can walk down the aisle or up the aisle or through the aisle.
Thank you. So I think we've heard two things, which is that we're looking for the evening rush time, and we're looking for Mr. Klein or the author to, that's co-author, however you want to handle it, just so that the person who is attesting to the data
Bottom line is
collection.
we're here to satisfy your questions and your information that you need. We'll be back here with Mr. Klein, and we'll be back here with the traffic count.
Okay, we appreciate that. We have to talk about timing, because you're gonna need to do data collection and then get us a report.
I would like to try to, we'll need 10 days in advance to get it before, so if we do 2 weeks, we'd have to have Mr. Klein try to get it in by the end of this week. I'm not sure if he'll be able to do that.
Yeah, understanding of that, okay.
But I know that the client has got issues, we'd like to try to move this forward as well. What I would like.
We're
I think
meeting in
we'll
2
take
weeks
the
and we're
safe-
also meeting early
I'm
in
gonna
April.
take the safe route, I'll go two meetings out. I'll tell you, when's your next meeting in April?
April 1st.
April 1st.
Oh, that's a cruel joke.
And the reason is that way, we won't have to renotice, we don't have to burden, I mean, we have an objector here that's here tonight, she wouldn't have to come back if we're not ready. This way, everybody can be in place to do it. I don't know Mr. Klein's schedule, I will do my best to try to find his schedule out.
Thank you. How do we document?
Well, while we have Mr. Taylor here, I don't know if we opened it to the public for any questions of Mr. Taylor, because this way,
That's fine.
he doesn't have to come back if Mr. Klein comes back.
Excellent, appreciate
Why don't
that,
we
okay.
Take care of that.
So, questions from the public for Mr. Taylor, this witness who testified to parking.
But can I have one more question? So in case Mr. Klein's not available and Mr. Taylor is, should they co-author the study at this point to be protected?
They can do that,
Okay.
or Mr. Taylor can submit the report from Dynamic as opposed to Mr. Klein submitting the report.
Right, so figure out who's available
Whatever it is.
and author and go to the site and
Yep.
cover everything.
We'll get that taken care of.
Loud and
No,
clear.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
With respect to the.
Excuse me, there was a hand up. may
You
not
have a
seen it.
question
Yes.
regarding this application?
Do you want me to come here, or can I ask from here?
This is the microphone.
Yeah, for the record.
Say your name and address, please.
Sri Singhvi, SHRI, last name SINGHVI, 50 Montview Avenue, Short Hills. Principal, does the principal of this business state that they're not going to open this facility the evenings of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Because if you look at the Google data, which talks about what's the traffic in those restaurants, it's significantly higher in those 3 evenings. And is your traffic or parking study going to cover that? And to Diane's point earlier, yes, there's limited parking. So if one business takes the parking, then the customers of the other businesses are not going to show up there because they're not going to find parking. So it's something, it's for township committee to think and address, and this business to address. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for council. In light of the fact that the applicant is going to be back here, is it appropriate to hear from the objector tonight so that perhaps the applicant will be better prepared to deal with whatever the objector has to say?
Or possibly address it, yeah.
That's fine, that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea.
Great. So
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Taylor. For now.
And this has to be open to the public for any comments on it.
Yes, this
what's
is
been
now,
testified to
yeah,
so far,
so
not
coming up
just-
for the public
Right.
to provide any comments, so you'll be sworn in because you're providing testimony.
Absolutely. Yes. My first name is Prosperina, Prosperina, Nemero, Nemerow. My home address, 25 Athens Road, Short Hills, New Jersey. Hello. I think I could probably shed a little light on this parking issue that we're talking about. I'm a resident of Short Hills for 20 years. I've worked in Millburn, downtown Short Hills, for the past 15 years. I am currently an owner of Poe Fitness, which is located at 531 Millburn Avenue, which is approximately 1 block away from this very nice fitness center that wants to open up. One of my biggest observations that I've noticed in Millburn has been the lack of diversity in our town. I love it here. I've lived here, I've raised my children here, they went through the school system, and there was no diversity in businesses. And the one oversaturated industry in this town is fitness. There are approximately 12 fitness centers in this area. SoulCycle, Club Pilates, AKT, Motion, Poe, SLT, Flywheel, Orange Theory, F45, Bar 3, Evolve, and YB. Now, I can look around the room and I think we're all could be pretty fit people, but having 12 fitness centers, probably with another one I think that is opening up in the Short Hills Plaza, I believe soon, and adding this studio, I would gather that this is an oversaturation in this area. Now, I went and I did my own little study, and we run similar classes similar to this facility, and our hours are from 5:45 a.m. till about 12 noon. We can have an average of 85 people walking through our facility on any given day. Now, I went through their schedule, and I went through our schedule, and I went through SLT schedule, which is literally right across the street from this facility. So if you take Poe, and if you take SLT, and if you take this facility, the parking will be horrendous. So between 5:45 and 12 noon, like I said, in our business, we have about 85 people that are in and out. One class is in, another class is out. Parking, and people don't, whoever said carpooling, people don't carpool. These are busy moms that want to get in and they want to get out. Do they park across the street behind in the municipal parking? Yes, they do. Will they walk from St. Rosa Lima to get to a class? No. If they don't find parking, they're not going to come. It's just simple as that. When we redid the construction in Millburn, in downtown Millburn, and I don't think anyone wanted to go to town to shop or to eat dinner because there was too much traffic. So, we run 7 classes between 5:45 and I'm just going to take 5:45 and 9. I'm not even going to take it to 12 noon. 5:45 and 9 a.m. parking is a challenge. So when I looked at the proposed studio schedule at their current location, they run the same schedule. If they run their schedule, we run our schedule, and SLT runs their schedule, that it's almost doubling the already challenged parking situation that we have. I don't know where we're going to fit all these cars. Now, with all due respect, I think I encourage merchants to come in. I'm a merchant myself. I'm there every day. So if you have any questions about parking, I'm the gal, because I can't even find parking. And we do have parking permits for our employees. We've purchased them, we utilize them, and I'm not parking on the street. My employees are not parking on the street. My instructors are not parking on the street. So I don't know where all these people are going to fit, honestly. Like you said, parking is parking. It is what it is. As far as restaurants, there's 3 restaurants that I can think of offhand that are in the area. Nighttime is not the issue. It's the morning time issues. Now, let's take it a step further. We have the construction that's going to be starting in the old Saks Fifth Avenue building. What's going to happen there? There's going to, if they have to do construction, they have to get police activity, and they close one side of the street. I don't know how the construction's going to go. I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, that's going to be a nightmare. My business is going to be impacted. If there's no parking, people aren't going to come to work out. They're just not. So I really do ask that you guys consider this, because the traffic flow is not good now, and it's not going to be good adding another facility. And again, I'm all for, no disrespect to your business. I'm all for new people coming into the area, but there's so much oversaturation of this fitness industry. And competition is good. I like competition, but you know what? When you have too much of something, then people just flip-flop. And the parking, it's going to be hurtful. And we really have to think about the people in our community. That's who keeps us in business, not people coming in from other towns. Millburn Short Hills are our clients. That's who I service. That's who I see. I see them every day. I walk in, I know their stories, I hear them. And they want to come to a place where, it's community-based. We're all merchants. We all want to, please the community. At the end of the day, it comes down to having a business that is profitable. Can't have a business that's not profitable if people can't come to the business. So I really do think that the board needs to think about this and really figure out, do we need more fitness centers, and and if we double all the clients that are coming to all these fitness centers and their peak times. I mean, I understand that the study that they did, but the bottom line is I'm there at 6 a.m. and I'm there at 12 noon and I am there at 1 o'clock. And we also do have night classes. And I wouldn't say at night the parking is such a challenge, but those peak hours, there is a challenge. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. A comment was raised earlier about weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yes.
Are you open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?
Yes.
And how do you find the parking, from your own perspective and your own experience, how do you find the parking availability?
In the morning or in the evening?
Both.
Okay, well, in the evening, on the weekends, we don't have night classes, but in the morning, between we can even call it 8 a.m. Between 8 a.m. and 12 noon, I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge on the weekends, but it is full. The whole block is full, starting from a little bit further than Caldwell Banker, let's say, all the way down. And on the weekends, people work out a lot. They come in, they come out, and now it just becomes like a routine, like people know that they have to get there a little bit earlier, but it is definitely a packed street.
And are you only open until noon on the weekends?
Our last class on the weekends is at 11 a.m. After 1 p.m. during the week, you can park wherever you want to park.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The study focuses on data collected on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
It shows the hours of 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. At least 29 parking spaces were available in the 3 parking areas, this Boulevard North, South, and the Lot 14. That seems to contradict what you were saying. So Do you have classes on Wednesdays? I just wanna make sure there was no.
We do, we have classes
different
every,
rules
no,
on
we
this
have,
date that we
we,
selected.
I'm not an expert on traffic control and parking. I just have my own personal opinion because I am there. On any, I just happen to go off of a Monday schedule. If you want to take it off of a Wednesday, do they need 37 spots? They have 30 trampolines. They need 30 spots.
I just wanted to make sure there was nothing weird about that specific day.
No, I think,
Like any other normal weekday, right? So
no, it's on any given day. It's the same thing. But if they need parking, SLT needs parking, and we need parking, I don't know where everyone's gonna be parking.
So I do have one comment. I remember, Dan, you said to me when you were the mayor, it was the year of all the banks, or was it all the nail salons? And when Mayor Becker was the mayor, it was all banks or nail salons. And last year when I was a mayor, you joked with me and said, you're the mayor of fitness. So I guess Jackie Benjamin is now also the mayor of fitness. This is what's going on. It's service industries. I would love a boutique to open up, but unfortunately boutiques are not opening up, and there's different parking requirements. This is a different, I know Po Yoga is very, very, very popular. I know everyone loves it. This is not yoga, it's different, so.
We have exactly similar classes.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not just yoga. We have
Oh.
3 modalities in
Oh,
our
okay.
locations.
So I guess what I'm saying is, we can't control what type of business is coming in if they fit the requirements and they fit the parking and everything else.
But this isn't not even
I
a
don't
one
think we
block
have- I
span.
don't think we have the ability to
That's
base
not where it's a
an
market,
application
yeah.
on what the use is. They have to fit the requirements, not if it's like 4 nail salons or 4 pizzerias or 4 banks. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's
Is there
not what
maximum?
we can base
Right.
our decision on.
I understand that, but I think that the parking will be very detrimental to businesses like myself, and especially when we're not talking that it's in Millburn and we're not talking that it's in the other side of town. We're talking about we can walk to it. You can throw a rock to it. It's right. I mean, it's not even 1 block.
Right. I do know that we've done traffic counts and what did you say, 14? I know that is not filled, and I know part of the complaints we have in this town, which is just the way it is, people don't want to walk. If they don't get a spot in front of where they're going, they feel frustrated.
Our clients do walk. They do
Yeah,
walk.
Good, I know. So
Yeah, they do.
if there's still spots at 14, and we can't base, unfortunately, our approval on the type of business. It has to be on the requirements of the parking study is valid and everything else. But I do hear you. I hear your concerns.
Great.
I think your question was, why Wednesday?
No,
Okay, well, let me just say, the reason why they do it on Wednesdays is because Wednesday is not a Monday, it's not a Friday. You typically get erratic patterns of parking, people showing up on Mondays and Fridays. Wednesday's a typical day, and that's why they do the counts on a Wednesday in the middle of the week, so you don't have any variations towards the beginning of the end of the week. So the fact that he did it on Wednesday is okay. That's typical of a parking or a traffic study, just to
thank
say.
you, that's very
Yeah.
useful for me. I was just wanting to make sure there's nothing weird about that particular day.
Yeah, and Wednesday is one of our busy days as well. So the same thing happens all week long.
I would like to suggest to the attorney that when the traffic expert gets here, Mr. Klein, he describes to us what is meant by all these initials in all these boxes.
The last 3 digits
The
of the
license
license
plate.
plate.
Pardon me?
It's a license plate.
Oh, these are the
Yeah,
license?
yeah, I had to figure that out too, but it's a license plate, yeah. But I agree with you, I think.
I don't know what that means.
It's the letters of the
The
license plate.
last 3 digits of the license plates.
Yeah.
The cars parked in that spot.
Oh.
Okay, so thank you for your
Great,
testimony,
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what do we have to do?
Okay, we're going to carry this application, did you say, Mr. Turteltaub, to the next meeting or the first
I think we'll do
meeting in
April 1st. The only reason being is
Okay.
that way we won't have to, I would ask that the board not require any further notice, that you can announce it tonight for April 1st. That way I can give Mr. Klein the fairness of getting the information in to respond to some of the questions here tonight. And if I just may say, and I appreciate your comments, this is a legally permitted use in the area. The use itself, if a competitor doesn't like a competitor coming in, that's not what this board considers. We have come to you with a traffic study that was done through a scientific means with observations at a time by somebody who was out in the field looking at it. We have Mr. Taylor who's here tonight. We'll have Mr. Klein here as well. But the issue here is the data and the 17 spots, well, actually we have the 30 with the basement itself, but the impact this will have on the neighborhood. And I do think that at the time you get done hearing from Mr. Klein, you'll see that the facts are that this use will fit into the neighborhood. And I do appreciate the board's time tonight and the questions, and we will hopefully get them all answered for the next meeting for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we would make a motion to carry application to April 1st with no required notice and requesting a revised traffic impact report.
Yes, with the hearing being held at 7:30 in this room as well.
Correct.
Yes.
Does anyone make such motion?
I will make a motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second, Dan, thank you. Do we take a voice vote or all?
Okay.
You don't have to vote.
Okay then.
Well then.
Take my motion back.
Okay.
Save that motion.
It's been carried. Thank you. We have one more item of business tonight. We're going to be voting, so I think you would stay. Yeah, you would stay. Thank you. Sorry. This item is for the proposed master plan amendment, the land use element. I noticed we do have some members of the public. If anybody did want to receive and didn't have the opportunity to print it, we have printouts available here, should you need. So I encourage you to. Okay. That is fine. So, for the benefit of those who were not with us at our last meeting, February 3rd, our planner, Paul Phillips, gave us a presentation or discussion at that meeting and walked us through the contents of the proposed amendment. I don't believe you actually have that's the clean version, not the red line version. We had made some minor comments based on the discussion among the board. Some revisions have been made, incorporated, and so what you see here is the revisions per Mr. Phillips returning them back to our board. So the board received both the red line version and the clean version. The intention of tonight's meeting is to offer members of the public the opportunity to ask questions or share opinions, support, concern, opposition for the board's consideration. I would consider this a reasonable number of participants. I'm not looking to, clock you on the time. So I want to give everybody, a few minutes to come up to engage, obviously, should we have any questions for the planner. And if it gets to be, I don't know, maybe after, if it starts to feel like we're going on and getting concerned about getting in the time frame, I'll take the opportunity at that point to ask us to wrap up individual comments. So that said, do we need any further preface?
Yes, just one other thing. This hearing tonight has been publicly noticed with publication and notice to the County Planning Board and the Office of Planning Advocacy, all in accordance with the statute. So the procedural prerequisites to conduct this hearing and ultimately at the conclusion of this hearing for the board, if it desires to consider the adoption of this amendment, have all been met.
Thank you. So that said, as it's a hearing, we'll invite each person who would like to speak to come up to the microphone. And so we can let the evening begin. So, sir, would you like to come up?
Thank you. Vishal, Vishal, last name Garg, Garg, 52 Silver Spring Road, Short Hills.
Do we have to be sworn? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Board, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Uh, what I'm going to speak is predominantly based on a study which Township conducted in April 2018, HEFSA study. So my observations are mainly based on that. I haven't been able to look at this plan, but at least I understand that, so I will mainly say based on that.
Can you clarify, a study that was conducted where?
Uh, it's called, it was conducted by the township. Let me make sure that I give
Township
you
of
the.
Millburn?
Township
Okay,
of Millburn.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't
I'm
catch that.
Township of Millburn. So, while all of us are very supportive of affordable housing, the first thing which I want to really ask to the board, do we have a master plan or a vision which says this is the direction we are moving? Or are we just reacting by each of the application coming from the builders? We did approval of Woodland a few months back, and that's the time this question was raised. What's our master plan? We are a built-out town. While we need to meet requirement, but obligation on us are dependent on what's our status. What I understand, 25% of our land is designated as non-use land as part of South Mountain Reservation and East Orange Waterworks. So we have only 75% of the land which is usable. But still taking a step back, do we have a master plan which says this is the way we will meet the requirements?
Great.
At least I'm not aware of that. And my first recommendation is that we should put down a master plan if that's not available for us, and then move forward in that direction. We should set parameters saying that this is what we will do, this is what we will not do, and any request which is coming should be considered in that light. Sorry, anyone wants to react to that? I'm happy to hear. I don't know what's the procedure. Do I get answer to my questions now, or?
Absolutely, I think we'd like to have the opportunity to answer that question. I don't know if you prefer to.
No,
ask them all up
it
front,
will
or
be
you'd
good.
like
I
to
have
engage?
3-4 questions. If I could get answers, that will be easier.
Great. So I guess I'm looking to both Paul and Ed. I don't know who would like to possibly take it first. The first answer is yes, we do, as a municipality, have a master plan as we're required to do. And we updated it as recently as 2018 in master plan reexamination. It is available online, so that actually is a great thing that you can go to our planning board website and can download those. Further, we, as a planning board, adopted a fair share housing plan element. And if I can ask you to speak to where that stands statutorily or in
Yes.
terms of acceptance by the state, just to give the context.
A part of our master plan is a housing element and fair share plan. And that plan sets up the general standards by which the township intends to satisfy its affordable housing obligation. The plan is a lengthy plan. It's 40, 50, 60 pages long. So I won't attempt to summarize it here. But the general conclusion in the plan is that the township has an insufficient land availability to satisfy what has been proposed to be its affordable housing obligation. And we seek approval to adjust our obligation because of that factor. However, as a result of that, when opportunities become available for affordable housing to be constructed, the township needs to consider those opportunities, because we can't just say we're going to rezone this vacant piece and this vacant piece and this vacant piece, and that's where we're going to put the housing, because we don't have enough vacant pieces. So it becomes a challenge for any municipality that is land poor in the sense of insufficient vacant land, to deal with some of the housing obligations that are being imposed. So that's part of the reason why these kinds of requests that are made are considered by the township, despite the fact that we have this overarching master plan and housing element and fair share plan, because that plan is, demonstrates that we have inadequate land to satisfy the obligation.
So
That-
I think then we are talking about the same study. The document says housing element and fair share plan, Township of Millburn, New Jersey.
That's correct.
So I read that. That has 67 pages to be accurate.
Okay, that was close.
So yeah, so it has 67 pages, and I did take pain to read that. I won't say line by line, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
so in fact, so my observations are based on that only. So good. That document, if you are referring, so one, it says that we have 4 specific land banks which we should potentially consider for rezoning. That document very clearly highlights that. I don't know if we have considered that as our first step, that we should be rezoning them. It lists out various vacant lots. This lot is not listed as one of the vacant lot considered for that. So why are we considering that? One, we haven't looked at 4 land banks and the vacant lot already specified in the study. Third big observation which I did from study, all the assumptions in that study assumes that for per acre we will make 6 housing unit, and apparently this request says 35 units per square, so per acre. So why such a significant concentration when our study, our master plan recommends only 6? So these are some of my observations. So if any comments on these 2-3 other observations?
Those substantive aspects I am incapable of answering, but we do have the planner here, and perhaps he can address some of those.
Next answer to that question.
Well, I think in part
And,
this,
you know, I'll say whether I think you're in the right track.
can you speak to where the plan stands in terms
Yes,
of?
the plan has been included as part of our declaratory judgment action that was filed by the township back in 2018. We're in the process of seeking an approval for that plan. It's a time-consuming, a long process. We hope to get that completed this year in 2020. And that's all I can tell you. We're working.
Should
with
we wait
the
for
court.
the approval before considering any other proposals?
Well, I think that with regard to the items that are in the housing element and fair share plan, despite the fact that it's been adopted, we are attempting to have that plan validated by the court in order to give us the township, certain protections. And for the most part, we have not implemented any of the provisions that are in there, because they're subject to change as a result of the proceeding that we are participating in court. On the other hand, to the extent that people are coming forward and making requests on specific pieces of property, for the reasons that I gave earlier, there's a need for the township and the planning board as an agency, so to speak, or an entity created by the township, to deal with these as they come along, because of what I said earlier. The conclusions in that housing element and fair share plan demonstrate that we have insufficient vacant land available to satisfy the obligation. So those are sort of looked at in a different way than the overall plan. And I'd like to suggest that we shouldn't have to do that, logic sort of dictates that you don't do anything until you get the whole plan laid out. Unfortunately, the process has not evolved in that logical way, and the township's faced with dealing with it. This township and every other municipality in the state are forced to deal with it as we are dealing with it here.
So fair point. I just want to highlight that our study says that out of the 4 land bank, 1 land bank has 17 such lots. So shouldn't the planning board, township should be considering that? Should we first look at that? Then a case-by-case basis which is coming up from builders, and it's specifically that lot which has not been listed in our own study?
Well, again, the the properties that are set forth in the Housing and Fair Share Plan are insufficient in terms of the volume of land, the amount of land, and the densities that are proposed to satisfy the obligation. So even if we did that, unfortunately, given the magnitude of the obligation, the affordable housing obligation the township has, we have to deal with other sites that become available. And until we get this plan resolved, we the township are probably gonna be faced with these things. This wasn't the first one, and it's not gonna be the last one. So the quicker we can get through the process, the better, and we're trying, but as I said, it's a very deliberate, time-consuming, and tedious process.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And again, I said, based
The
on.
planners out there smiling.
You're doing a good job of smiling.
And I want the record to reflect that.
You're doing great.
Sure.
I've just, sorry, you have some comment?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Please ask it of the guy in the audience there.
Would the consideration of this potential amendment have been any different if our housing element fair share plan was already approved? Would it have made a difference to how this board would have potentially looked at this proposed new zone for those lots?
Good question.
No.
It would not have made it.
No, and again, the reason is that the plan, if the plan that we have proposed is approved as is, it will still require us to deal with any other properties that come in seeking modification of zoning to provide some portion of affordable housing because we haven't met the obligation.
Well, I thought the plan said we can meet the remaining obligation through a set-aside ordinance, where this lot, for example, that we're considering does allow residential use. But if we do adopt a set-aside ordinance, it would just have to have a certain portion of units, newly to-be-built units, set aside for affordable housing. So I'm not sure if we would have to rezone before to a different use to satisfy our affordable housing obligation. And that's why I'm asking the question if it would have made a difference if our plan in writer form was actually approved by court. I'm surprised to hear it would not.
Okay, and I'm glad to say that the planners stood up.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
It's all yours.
So I think, Ed, if I understand the question correctly, and you can
I'm not
tell
sure I
me
framed it
if
right,
I'm
but-
wrong. Now, I think what he's asking, Ed, is if the town had an approved plan, as we sit here, an approved housing plan, and this property was not part of that plan, and we did have protection from the courts, we had a judgment of repose, would we necessarily have to entertain a rezoning of this property for affordable housing?
Fair
And
enough. I can answer that question.
And I think that the answer is no, we
Yes,
wouldn't.
that's correct.
Is that,
That's-
okay, so
You
that's,
framed it a lot better than I did, thank you.
Yeah.
that's okay.
And
So can I just, and I didn't mean to be.
No,
flip,
no,
Ed.
no,
It's-
that's-
You were
that's
doing
fine,
great,
Ed.
but
I appreciate
I'm here to share this with you a little bit. So, it's very complicated. I'll try and answer it in the best way I know how. We did adopt a housing element and fair share plan back in 2018. But because of the legal action and because we need to have our plan approved by the courts, that plan is sort of fluid and evolving. And we are currently in discussions with the Fair Share Housing Center, which is the nonprofit housing advocacy group. There's a special master involved. Ultimately, we'll have to go before a judge. But I think, as Ed pointed out, until we get a plan approved, any potential landowner that basically comes forward with a reasonable proposal that includes affordable housing, given the fact that we're a significantly developed community with very little vacant land and a huge obligation, and we don't even know what the number is, but it's a huge obligation. Some people think the number's in the 2000s. We have to entertain these proposals, and we know based on our own experience representing both Ed and myself, other municipalities, that until we get a plan, given that fact pattern, we have to entertain reasonable requests that include inclusionary housing, because those requests are on the radar of Fair Share Housing Center and the court-appointed master. So we put together a plan that was in place, but we're now in litigation, and basically that plan, for all practical purposes, is being negotiated, and hopefully we can come to some conclusion of that sometime in 2020, and hopefully sometime in the mid portion of 2020 rather than the later portion. Because as Ed says, unless we do that, I think we could very well see more and more of these proposals. And by the way, the township, and as the township planner working on the affordable housing, is doing everything possible to try and move those negotiations forward with the other players, but there are some logistical issues. The representative from Fair Share Housing was just recently appointed the state controller. No one's filled the void, and we want to come back to the table, and we're having a really difficult time in doing that.
Thank you. So just for my understanding, so if we do not theoretically approve this plan, defer approval, are we legally at some violation of the law, or what happens if township, if the board decides that they will defer it till the plan is approved?
Well, and I'm going to defer to Ed, but until right now, we basically, as part of the legal action, have immunity from the courts, but that's the good news. But the bad news is, notwithstanding the fact that we have immunity, we know that we're going to have to consider any reasonable proposals that include affordable housing between now and ultimately when we have a plan approved. Is that a reasonable characterization?
Yes, I think all that's true, and if the township elected to effectively withdraw from the process and say, okay, look, this is just too much, we're just not going to do that, we will lose that immunity that Paul Phillips just mentioned, which means that we will be vulnerable to what's known as builder remedy lawsuits, where any property owner can come in and bring a legal action against the township to rezone their property, provided that they are providing a reasonable number of affordable housing units in their project. And the difficulty with a builder's remedy lawsuit is that the municipality, if it has not satisfied its obligation and does not have this protection, is likely going to have to rezone that litigant's property in the manner in which they seek it to be rezoned. So what happens is the municipality loses whatever control it has, it loses it, because now anywhere in the municipality, a property owner can come in and make that claim. And the burden then shifts to the township to demonstrate why environmentally, largely environmentally, this site that's being proposed is inadequate to accommodate affordable housing. So that burden shift is significant, because otherwise the person who's suing has the burden of persuading the court that they're right. In a builder's remedy lawsuit, that burden flips, and the person who's bringing the lawsuit is presumed to be right, and the township has to demonstrate why they're wrong. And that burden is an enormous burden, and municipalities generally do not fare well when they're faced with builder remedy lawsuits.
So, no, thanks for that explanation. Given that a lot of people are waiting, I'll just leave 2 points for consideration for the board, and I will, although I had other questions, but it's fair for others to get opportunity. This property is not even listed in our master plan, so we should consider that. Yes, it is unapproved plan. But in our own master plan, which was prepared less than 2 years back, we haven't listed this as a property. And based on my understanding, we have assumed that any acre will result into 6 units, And this development is talking about 35 units per acre. So which is 6 times than what our assumptions are there in our study. So should we be considering such heavy density? Of course, traffic and incidentally, the traffic problem will be is on the same section which we were just discussing through this evening. I'm not expecting answer. I'm just leaving those thoughts because I want others to get opportunity. Thank you for giving me.
Please come up. Yep.
Yes. Shri, S-H-R-I, last name Singhvi, S-I-N-G-H-V-I, 50 Montview Avenue, Short Hills. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that Vishal said, but I did have a couple of questions. Do we have immunity from the remedy lawsuit until what time? Until we either withdraw this or there's a settlement on the town's fair share plan?
Yes, what
for
happens
housing?
is we have immunity to particular dates. I don't recall the next date that's coming up. And the court then will review it at that time and determine whether it will extend it. And as long as we are proceeding to pursue our declaratory judgment action in good faith and negotiating as the planner said, the court will generally continue to extend that immunity. It's not an unlimited immunity.
And is it fair to say that our obligation could be north of 1,000 units? As of now, we don't know exact obligation, and it could be as high as 1,000. I thought 2,000 was a number thrown by the town planner.
That's not my number.
No, but
No, that's not our number at all, but
No, wait, because.
no. Yeah, I mean that was the number. It could be 200. It could be up to 2,000.
You want to do it or you want me to try? I'll try.
Go
So
ahead.
ultimately, when we come to a settlement with Fair Share Housing and the master and hopefully through the courts, we're going to have to agree as to what our number is. That's our total obligation based on a very complex methodology that takes into account 35 factors, and I'm not going to go through
Yes,
it.
yes,
Let me finish. I think you'll find it instructive. So ultimately, there's no one agreed upon methodology in the state of New Jersey. That's why we don't know what our number is. If we went to trial on that issue of the number would be adjudicated at trial and we get a number. Suffice it to say that the various methodologies out there, Millburn's going to have a high number, and it could well be north of 1,000 or close to 1,000. It's going to be a high number. You got to just be patient with me. Millburn also gets the chance to seek a vacant land adjustment because it doesn't have the land resources to meet that, and I'm just picking a number out of the air, 1,000 unit obligation.
Yes.
So what it does, and what we did as part of the plan that the other gentleman mentioned, is we looked at the vacant land resources. And we know we don't have a lot of vacant land, and we applied something called presumptive densities, which the other gentleman raised, which were low densities because most of the vacant land is in single-family districts, by the way. They're little spot infill vacant lots, which is why we use the lower density. We come up with a number, and that's considered the realistic development potential based on resources. And I can assure you, and I'll say this putting my professional reputation or what's left of it on the line this evening, that our realistic development potential is not going to be anywhere near 1,000 units. We don't have the resources, and Fair Share understands that. However, that number, the difference between what you have to provide and that number that's agreed to is referred to as something called unmet need, and you have to make some provision through overlay zoning, which is in the plan that the gentleman mentioned, to see if you can meet some portion, usually not all of, that unmet need, to show in good faith that you're providing some mechanisms in place in your zoning to potentially meet that unmet need, even though you're not specifically zoning for inclusionary development. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I felt I had to kind of
that's helpful because what the residents are trying to understand what our obligation is, and does this number that for this particular what the developer is requesting move the needle on that or not? Because if it is even 200 or 400, that we're talking about like 2% of the need that we have to meet. If there are going to be such projects which are going to have, 10% of the units that are going to be affordable, and our obligation is 200, 300, which is significantly below the numbers that have been thrown around here, that would imply we're going to need like 3,000 units to have 200 affordable. And that's the single biggest concern a lot of us residents have. Is this the most effective mechanism to deal with our affordable housing obligation? Because this is not moving the needle, and it is taking town further and further away. God forbid, if the number shows up to be 500 affordable units or 1,000 affordable units that we owe, are we going to go down this path doing 5 at a time? Out of every 35 units, 5 are going to be affordable? And would that be a prudent way of addressing it? And maybe,
So
I would ask you that question.
I believe it does move the needle. It may not move the needle in terms of the magnitude of the numbers, but it moves the needle because ultimately it shows good faith and proactive behavior on the part of the township in recognition of the fact that it has a huge obligation and no vacant land resources, and the somewhat arbiters, being Fair Share Housing and the court-appointed master and ultimately the courts, are going to view that in terms of any potential overall settlement. The fact of the matter is we have this huge obligation without vacant land resources, and any potential player that steps up with a reasonable project until we get a complying plan is going to be at the table. I mean, and I don't make the rules, and I deal with the cards that I'm dealt, and it's a very difficult situation to be in representing the township. But this is the fact pattern that exists. Ed, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Two things. It's not unique to Millburn. First of all, I want to make that clear. The challenges that Paul just went through and that I've gone through, and we've both gone through in some cases, are statewide. I mean, municipalities all over the state, and I represent several, and Paul represents several, are going through the same thing. I think, I don't know if you caught an item that Paul said. When you're talking about obligations of 500 or 1,000, whatever that number may be, and you're looking at, do 12 units move the needle, 12 affordable units, or 5 affordable units, or 7 affordable units move the needle. It doesn't move the needle significantly when you're talking about 1,000 units. But the key is what Paul mentioned, and that is this realistic development potential. That's the number that we have to satisfy directly in our plan. And that realistic development potential is going to be a much more significantly smaller number. Wow, that's a lot of adverbs there. Number than the 1,000. So, for example, Paul's report, as I recall, the Housing Element Fair Share Plan, and it could probably be verified by the previous speaker, the realistic development potential determined by an analysis of the vacant land was, I believe, around 17 units. So if we were successful in getting that plan approved, what we would have to rezone for is a project or projects that would produce 17 affordable units. So 3 units, 4 units, 5 units moves that needle, because that needle only has to go up to 17. Now, in fairness, this negotiation process that Paul referred to, and it's not negotiation of horse trading, although I suppose there's some of that in there.
Yeah.
It's based upon a whole series of rules and regulations and standards, and some of those standards don't make a lot of sense today because they were done in 1993 and we're in 2020. So there's all sorts of deficiencies with that. But nonetheless, this process that we go through will hopefully result in a number that is, if it's not 17, it's something higher than 17, but something that's realistically achievable. And any of these even smaller projects that we're talking about will move that needle closer, because we have to satisfy that. Once we reach that point, we've satisfied the obligation the direct obligation. And then what Paul was referring to was the difference between that number and whatever, quote, the number is, 1,000, 800, 600. That difference is what is satisfied not through direct zoning, but through overlay zoning of already utilized non-vacant sites, giving those sites, or the owners of those sites, the opportunity to develop an affordable housing project as of right, if they want to do that. If they find that that's, from an economic perspective, an advantageous thing for them to do, they'll do that. And if they do that, then they can do that as of right, and that will not affect the first needle, because we've met that. It'll start to eat into that delta, that gap part, which we will never satisfy, but it will just slowly move that up. But that's over a period of time. And I apologize for the complexity, but.
No. We have all spent a lot of time on this,
And I'm
and so
glad you
detail
did.
is more helpful.
I'm glad you did.
So just kind of summing it up, each project, not only does it help move the needle, and I had already written down, shows good faith, versus the 45 years that Millburn unfortunately was not involved in this process. And there are towns, and you could look this up online, Englewood, that was not following.
Englewood Cliffs.
Englewood Cliffs.
Who just got slammed. It's all available online. And I also think in 2018, this was not in the master plan because this wasn't before us in 2018. So why are we considering it now? Because it is before us now. It helps do those few items. It is an empty lot. It's an empty building. It's a parking lot. It's not providing any rateable or beauty or function to the town. And there's a lot of reasons why we're considering it and why it's very important that we do move the needle, start doing some wise development, and do it carefully and thoughtfully, which this project, what's presented to us, we have to work with. Does that make sense?
Okay. I mean, the only thing I would leave it, because there are other people who want to comment on this, is our town has bullseye as far as developers are concerned. There are many here. I'm myself an investor into a lot of real estate developers and REITs. I know why this town is attractive to them. There's a reason the home prices are dropping here. There is more supply than demand. Creating more and more supply will create a vicious downward spiral on home prices, which will lead to higher taxes, less revenues for schools, and that spiral can be downward very quickly. What I have read is that this kind of a development would be attractive for empty nesters. Honestly, I bought my home from empty nesters. They didn't want to live in Short Hills. They rented an apartment in Maplewood because it's much cheaper there, and the commute gets even shorter as you get towards the city, or people move to the city. So this is going to be an alternative for single family housing. And this is something town should very seriously think about, how to balance our affordable housing commitments, which I know are legal obligations, and we got to do something about it, but at the same time, not shoot ourselves in the foot. And what may seem as some revenue and upside and beautification of downtown, but can have very adverse long-term consequences. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Additional commenters, questions? Yeah, please.
Yes. Deborah Nevis, DebraNevas, 65 Knollwood Road in Short Hills. I just wanted to ask a little more about the density of this project, and just to go back to what was mentioned earlier, the master plan has set out 6 units per acre, so I'm trying to understand why we're allowing 6 times more density on this site, and what the purpose of the master plan is in laying out a number if it's not going to be considered when a new site comes into play.
So let me deal with the first question. So the 6 units per acre, which the other gentleman mentioned, is in the housing element and fair share plan. That's part of the exercise that the township has to do, consistent with the COA rules, to request a vacant land adjustment. Essentially, you look at a piece of vacant property and you assign a density to it based on its zoning, the surrounding uses, its characteristics, and so forth. And it's a theoretical exercise to come up with the RDP, or the realistic development potential. Much of the limited vacant land that Millburn has, that we found when we did the study back in 2018, are basically isolated lots within single-family districts where we assigned the minimum presumptive density under COA rules, which is 6 units per acre. We thought from a land use planning perspective, anything more than that for those vacant sites would be too much, that site couldn't sustain that. If, for example, there was a vacant piece of property that we would have looked at when we did that exercise, let's say in the B4 district, there weren't, I can assure you that the density we would have assigned to it, and that fair share housing, the court appointed master would have been all over us, would have been significantly higher than 6 units per acre. So again, that you have to understand that 6 units per acre was only applied to those lots within the midst of single-family homes to come up with a number. If we would have applied a higher density, we would have come up with a higher RDP over and above what is right now in the plan.
Can I add to that, Paul?
Yeah.
I think the right comparison as it relates to this specific proposed amendment is not the assumption under the housing element and fair share plan for the presumptive density. It is really, what is this site currently zoned for, and what does this amendment do to that current zoning? Because the B4 zoning does permit a residential use. Now, I'm not a architect or planner, but if a developer had to look at, if I just use the as of right zoning, how many units can I build on this site per acre? He would probably come up with a conclusion of somewhere around 25 already. Based on current zoning, no changes. So I think the comparison we should make is, we allow 25 units, if that was the correct number, I'm not sure if it is. Already, now we're allowing 35. It's not the 6 versus 35, it's really what do we allow today versus what is being proposed. Is that fair, Paul?
I think that makes, that's a very good example.
Okay. So then I wanted to ask about the realistic development potential number, which I know you had proposed a while ago is potentially 17 units.
Yes.
So we're already at, between Woodland and Matt Cali, we're already at, I think, 40. If you add up the 30 at Matt Cali and the 15 that are coming in at Woodland Road.
We're at 42.
At 42. So is that being considered? And then my understanding is that Woodmont Properties is also trying to develop 225 units on JFK Parkway across from the Matt Cali building, so that's gonna give us another pretty high number of affordable housing units.
Well, I can't speak to the latter proposal. That's complex, and there are all kinds of issues with that property as to whether or not it's even available, because it's subject to environmental regulations. Let's put that aside, and let's, for the moment, and deal with the property out on JFK and the Silverman. So, and we know this through our negotiations with Fair Share Housing. They are, since the Silverman property and the property that's subject to this master plan amendment came after we did that plan. They weren't available. We didn't know. They weren't on the, they weren't on the horizon at that point.
And they weren't vacant.
And they weren't vacant. But now we know the position that Fair Share Housing and the court-appointed master are going to take, unfortunately, is that those properties should be calculated towards your RDP. Now, we can argue, and have argued, that that's not the way it works. I can tell you that we may not win that argument, probably will not win that argument, and we may have to lump those properties in the RDP, which will get that number up, which is why both Ed and I are imploring that we get this plan done as soon as possible, because it becomes a moving target, and every additional site between now and the time we get compliance basically is ultimately going to add to that RDP if Fair Share Housing's position is right Fair enough, Ed?
Yes, yes, and we, as Paul said, we don't agree with that position, and we will challenge that position, but we can't guarantee success in challenging that.
Right, so
So
to put that
I-
in layman's terms.
So I'm not, yeah, I'm not
it's-
understanding. So you're saying that those 42 units would mean that they would say, oh, you can have more than 17, and then we would have to go on top of the 42? Is that what
Exactly,
you're?
that's
Right, so now we've
So it
just
wouldn't
moved
be
it to
counted
52,
Moved to
towards-
52, and
You
you
never catch
haven't
up.
gotten any credit for what you've done.
Yeah, and you never
That's what
catch
we
up.
And you never
Right.
catch up,
Which is,
the argument.
So that's what we're trying to prevent from happening.
Okay, and so we can't look to what's being proposed for Woodmont as adding to what's gonna be coming in terms of our affordable housing
my
numbers?
understanding is that Woodmont's not on the table as we stand and sit here this evening.
That's correct.
Which means what?
Which means it's not being actively considered as a site that would be part and parcel of our housing plan.
Does that mean it's not gonna be developed?
The property in question is watershed property,
Right,
and there's something called the Watershed Moratorium Act that was adopted in 1990 that prevents the disposition of watershed property by companies, private or public, that own watershed property. This property is watershed property. The statute that was adopted in 1990 has a safety valve in there whereby a water company that owns watershed property can seek to obtain an exemption from that moratorium. That process has not been initiated by the property owner, which is New Jersey American Water Company, that owns all that property on the other side of JFK by the reservoir. So, as Paul said, it's not available now because it's under the moratorium. So from our perspective, that's not part of our plan, it's not being considered as part of our plan, but that does not mean to say that they may not make an application in the future to try to seek that exemption in order to make it available, and then it becomes that's a different story. And again, to Paul's point, and the point that I made earlier, that it behooves us to try to move this plan forward as quickly as we can, because we need to stop the process. We need to get that permanent immunity, and permanent is only between now and 2025, so it's not forever. But we need to get that as soon as possible, so we can at least enjoy some respite from this continuing process that we're dealing with.
so that moratorium applies to all 22 acres that are up there that New Jersey American owns? Or can there be a carve out where they say, fine, this is wetlands and we're not asking to develop this, but these 5 acres or these 3 acres we would like to develop, they're not under the moratorium?
And I'll say, please answer this question, let's focus though beyond this.
I was just
Okay.
thinking
But
the
it-
same thing.
yeah.
There are criteria that the DEP utilizes to determine whether land owned by a water company is watershed property. I don't know what those criteria are, but they are articulated somewhere. I can tell you that the 22 acres, 25 acres actually, that is being considered by the developer trying to deal with this has been determined by the DEP to be watershed property.
Okay.
So that determination has already been made, and that's why they are under the moratorium and they have to go forward with it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions regarding the proposed land use element, comments, testimony? Okay.
So, can I say something?
Yes.
No, because I can hear about
Excuse me. I don't mean to interrupt.
Is he not allowed to say something?
No, he
Oh,
is, but we should close, we should finish the public
Close
portion,
public
close the public portion, and then we can obviously discuss it.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have another speaker, or you, I don't know if he's like today? I don't know.
Not sure.
I just.
I don't think so.
Okay. So if nobody else would like to provide comment from the public, then we will close the public comment session, and now we will conduct internal conversation. So that means if we're mentioning something and you have something, at this point, it's just for the planning board to deliberate. Okay, thank you. Now, Jorge.
No, a little, I want to answer a little what everybody is talking about here, about density. So I can hear all the time, I said that in the last meeting. I keep hearing from everybody saying that our downtown doesn't have a life, retails are dying, people doesn't want to come to downtown, and everybody's complaining about traffic in downtown. But most of these people who are complaining about traffic in downtown, they are going to Summit. And they said that because, I don't know why, but my answer about that is, when I go to Summit, I have more traffic than here in Millburn. But I go to Summit because there are more retails, there are more things to do, there are more restaurants, there are more diversity. So, if we want to have a lively downtown, and if we want to have our retails to survive, we need people. So if we keep only having 6 units, as I hear here in that corner, we will never have a downtown. If that's the idea that what we want as a town, we want to have a small downtown without a few retails, that's fine. So let's have here 6 units and done. But that's not what I hear all the time about people. I hear that why we don't have a downtown. Okay, so the solution is to bring people. Density is good for the downtown. Density is good for the climate change because it's more environmental friendly to have 40 people or 35 people in 1 acre and not to have this huge house. I live in one of those huge houses, so I'm not against those houses, but I have to keep my lawn with water every day in the summer, so I use water. I use 1,000 square feet just to live 4 people in one level, plus the other square footage. Here we are talking about 35 families living in a small space, which this is environmental good. So sometimes this is what I don't understand when I hear why we have so high density. And this location, specifically this location, is very close to the Millburn train station. So people, they may not be driving so much, and also everybody's talking about driving. Again, driving is against the environment. So having the opportunity to have 35 units in this location, very close to the train station, is a great opportunity. I feel that this is good. Now, can be bad for traffic? Well, we will need to have traffic studies, and if we find that there is problem with the traffic, there will be consultants to help us how to fix the traffic. It can be bad for the school system. Maybe we are going to feel that we are going to have so many kids in our schools. Everybody moved to this town because of school. I did that. I don't want to have a bad school system. I don't. But again, this is something that we need to ask to the Board of Education. How much is the capacity of our schools? If we don't have the capacity, well, we need to work together with the Board of Education to make more capacity. I hear somebody saying that Empty Nester, for example, they moved to Maplewood. Yes, because Maplewood, people walk. There is, the downtown even is smaller, but there are more things to do in Maplewood. People in Empty Nester are moving to Summit because there are more things to walk in Summit. Many others are moving, of course, to the city, Jersey City, more urban spaces. So I feel, so this is another point. Why our properties are lowering our, yes, the prices of our houses are going down. Yeah, that's true. But the reason is because we are building these buildings in downtown? I don't think so, because the prices are going down since 2008. The crisis in 2008, many cities, they recover, we didn't. If you see the pricing of our big houses are going down, because there is no way for people here to walk. So if we want to improve the value of our property, we need to prepare a town that is more walkable. And this is what we need to do. Now, based on what I'm saying, I feel, and also affordable housing, it's not just because we need to get those numbers, it's also nice because we bring diversity to the town. Now, my point with this is, again, as I said before, I think we need a mixed-use building. We cannot eliminate, even though we talk about the option to have a retail, but once it's built as a residential, who is going to build back a retail? Even though we do the opportunity, or we said you have the option for a retail. I think this building has to be a mixed-use building. That's it.
Thank you, okay. I'll let Joe go and then you get
I just have a question for the planner and our attorney. Would approving this amendment help in the negotiation that you're involved in now?
That's easy. Yes.
No, I thought so.
Sure, you answer the easy ones. Jumps right up.
You're not gonna contradict me.
No, I'm not.
Well, and the opposite is also true. If this gets turned down, this doesn't help the negotiation.
Yes, that's correct too.
Yes.
Are you speaking about the specific negotiation with this one property or
No, I'm
entire
talking
affordable?
about the
Fair
negotiation
share house.
that they're involved in.
Yeah, okay, I'm just asking which one.
Thank you. That was your question?
That was my
Okay,
question.
great.
I knew the answer, but
That was-
I wanted to.
For the record.
I wanted everyone else to hear it.
You wanted to throw the softball.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna let Shanak ask his question, or make your comment.
I wanted to respond to Aura's comment. I have a slightly different perspective, and I don't know which one is right, but it's different. We do need more people in general visiting our retail establishments to make them more viable. But does it mean we need more people living in downtown to make it viable? Because you need daytime traffic, and that's what, in my view, Summit has. All those mixed-use properties that you see along Springfield Avenue or on the avenues that lead to the train station from Springfield Avenue, most of them are ground floor retail and offices or medical offices or whatever above those spaces. What that does is bring daytime population of people who are spending their lunch dollars or shopping or whatever, and doing it there within downtown to make it viable. So this notion that we need people living in downtown to have a vibrant downtown, I don't think that's a fact. It may be true to some extent that you can't have it empty, but it doesn't mean we have all the purchasing power in the world in this town to make our downtown viable. If a business that satisfies the need of the people comes up, Live, for example, I think it's doing really well. You have people going there. So I think we should not accept as true, we should study this more. Do we need more people or do we need more daytime population? And if we conclude we need more daytime population, then from a land use perspective, do we need medical offices? Do we need, in general, office use is difficult because somebody has to decide to move to downtown. I get it, there are office spaces that are not fully occupied. But maybe medical office use is an answer to get more daytime population into our downtown. So I just wanted to offer that different perspective. It's not a question here for us to all consider. The question I have is, we are engaging as a township in a downtown vision study. It's an RFP is out for that. If we, I'm sorry. Some of my frustration coming up. If we do zoning change for this 1.5 acres in question, how does that impact what we're gonna do in the future? And we're not, I mean, as a body, my view is that our role is to comprehensively address long-term land use. What we seem to be doing is addressing, making it easy for the township committee not to engage in smart zoning by changing this land use. That's really how I see this particular amendment, that instead of making a comprehensive plan for the entire stretch for the entire Essex stretch of SS and Millburn, that is really the B4 zone, instead of making a long-term analysis and determining what is the appropriate land use, which is, I believe, the role of this body, we're just trying to take a piecemeal approach obviously if you're being forced to take the piecemeal approach is what I'm hearing, given where we are in our negotiations relating to our affordable housing obligations. But it doesn't seem like an ideal way to resolve this question at this point.
May I respond?
Sure.
First, medical requires a huge amount of parking. It's very difficult to have a medical office downtown.
Sure.
The requirements is more than even retail and exercise. It's very, very onerous. A comprehensive plan, the town has done that exercise twice. It takes years. That could be a couple of years, just by the time we get the RFP out, by the time we decide on the planner, by the time we have visioning sessions through the township. You're talking about maybe 2 years, if you're lucky, to get a plan. And then to make something happen. In the meantime, we're doing what we've done for 45 years, and fair share housing is not going to look favorably upon that. Whereas this plan helps them look favorably upon us. And this is not a high-rise building. And I agree with everything Jorge said, up until when you said it should be mixed use. Because we have empty buildings. So to then make it mixed use, that's going to require more parking requirements. And there are a little piece of from Bhakti Yoga down, and then there's the on the corner, which is empty, which could be a beautiful restaurant. And if there were more people living downtown, they will come into downtown, and we will encourage more restaurants. And we will encourage, and if there's 4 more exercise places, there'll be more bodies for the exercise places. The service industry. So I think we really need to move on this, because waiting 2, 3, 4 years, nothing's happening. It's not revitalizing the town. It's not getting our fair share housing approval moving. So, you know, we can just keep talking and pushing this off and delaying and delaying and delaying, and people will keep going to Summit until we went to Summit the other night for dinner. We parked, I don't know, 4 blocks away. We drove around. And there's a Portuguese restaurant. It'd be great if that was in Millburn. So what I'm saying is, we need to start. This is our starting point. That's what I'm saying.
And if I could just also agree with these two, just from my personal experience, I live in South Mountain, which is downtown. My kids, I have 2 kids in middle school, spend a lot of money downtown. They walk to downtown. I sign my kids up for classes downtown because they can walk and I don't have to drive them. So having people live close by, in my experience, and I know a few others live in South Mountain or close to downtown, it really does impact where you choose, you know, to spend your business.
I picked my kids' orthodontist so they could walk
Yeah.
to the orthodontist.
Right,
You didn't
exactly.
go to the one in
To that
Springfield.
point, the zoning does allow for residential use. What we are trying to do here is allow for a commercially viable project, not thinking about long-term land use. The current zoning permits residential use. The current zoning does not need an affordable set aside. What we are responding to is a developer approaching us and saying, by the way, I really can't build a viable project. This is me talking, this is not the developer saying, I don't want to put words in, but he's not. I can't build a viable project because you, the township, needs me to build retail or limited offices. That's what's happening here. You have somebody saying, the current zoning, essentially, or somebody thinking, at least in how I see it, and I, again, may be wrong, is I can't build a viable project with today's zoning. The town is kind of trying to meet its affordable housing obligations. Can I use that to go get more density and build a viable project? That's essentially what's happening. We have to see through that. And fine, if it helps us, I'm all for it. The question Joseph asked about, does it help us in our negotiations? Yes, we should consider that, and that's a part of our decision making. But this is not long-term land use planning.
So I'm gonna thank you. I think these are all this is healthy dialogue. It's important for us to hear what one another has to say. It's important for us to hear what our community has to say. So I do appreciate that. I do also feel like those were some of the recommendations that we as the planning board, we are not the lawmakers in the community, but we are the plan makers in the community. And I think we talked about doing just that, and really what you're addressing is essentially market forces, right? The developers want to develop what is selling right now. And so, we also heard on the application that, it used to be banks that we're all needing to locate in the downtowns, and then it was nail salons, and now it's fitness studios, and we've, you know, adapted and adjusted and stayed flexible to, you know, we had changes to our, you know, zoning so that we would be permissive. So every time a fitness studio wanted to come, they didn't have to come get a variance. We're not prescribing that they have to locate in certain spots. So staying open to the market forces, allowing ourselves to say retail or commercial and make the case, I think was what we were striving to do. Because we do want people to locate in the town. We don't necessarily want, we need parking, but we don't necessarily need surface parking lots in sort of the heart of the downtown. Look at how Summit does it. It's on the exterior so that people are walking. Look at how Princeton does it. You know, it's hidden behind the building, so you have a lovely walking corridor. That said, that's the urban design part. But getting to what we should put on the ground floor, which is I think where we're hitting some, you know, challenges and disagreements, is I think we're posing as the planning board that allow the market to dictate what is appropriate and what will make the town vibrant.
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion so we have something on the table to talk about. I'll make a motion that the planning board approve the amendment to the land plan, to the land use plan element of the Township of Millburn Master Plan as prepared by Phillips Price. There's a motion on the floor now.
Yes.
I haven't heard anybody second it.
I would second that, Mr. Steinberg and Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. We have a motion that is now seconded, so we will take.
Any discussion on the motion and then any
We can
further
have a discussion on the
Yes, you
motion
can.
first.
If there is any.
Okay.
I move the question.
No questions. Okay, hearing none, we will vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. No.
Yes, I'd like to add like a little plug for sustainability in there, so that the buildings should consider moving towards a more
There's a motion on the
carbon
floor.
neutral.
Motion, you need
There's
to
a
make
motion.
just for the motion, make
Sorry.
an amendment.
I should have made that motion.
But yes.
Can I make an amendment to the?
Not after the vote has been taken, or been started.
I'll say yes, but you're gonna hear me
Good.
exercise because I agree with Jorge. It's sustainable if it's sustainable, and there's nothing about this proposal that says you'll build towards a sustainable building.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay. Thank you. The next planning board meeting will be held March 18th, 2020, 7:30 PM here. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
5 PM, wow.
I don't think it's.
I have a TV show to watch.
Good job, sir.
Mark, I'm sorry.
Yeah.